Hey everybody, this is a tutorial on sculpting without reference images. I thank you for being here. I respect this space, and hopefully you'll kind of see the importance of reference images. But I think that modeling in general is just a patient process. So you're going to see right now how I have to be patient in creating what I want to create. I'm going to actually do a fork. And just to give you kind of like the understanding of it, there's many ways to model what this fork might be crafted from. I'm going to start from a cube because that's what I just kind of witnessed on watching my tutorial online or another tutorial online. And this seemed like the best way to start it. I'm going to say that, there are many ways to do things in Maya, and sometimes the best way is to just kind of watch tutorials. And for me, I actually thought that the best way to do this would be to create a plane and work from it from like a vertical fork, but I noticed that this might be a better way. And it's just a tutorial to show you how long some things may take. So I started with a cube, and it's still listed as cube. And I'm just going to kind of like make this expandable surface, and hopefully you might learn some things about this process. So right now this is just a cube that's been kind of expanded some. I'm going to kind of thin it out, and I'm going to go ahead and go into the channel box, go to my polycube shape, and I can actually do this also by going into my attributes editor and going to the polycube over here. And I'm going to divide this, I think width might be good, divide it into 7 sections. And I'm going to start by just extruding on the faces here. Going into face mode, I'm going to select 4 separate locations by pressing shift. And I'm going to actually extrude these. Now, when I press Command E, we noticed this before, and I'm actually going to go into my 4-channel view. We noticed that when we extrude, it actually can turn black, and that's like the reverse surface. So, sometimes you might think, oh, I should extrude in if I'm trying to make a fork, and you can see like kind of 3 prongs there, but that makes a reverse negative of space that becomes a challenge to edit. So you have to intuitively think about what it means to extrude, and extrude is a very much needed tool in Maya. In extruding, you always want to have the gray faces. So I extruded it, and I'm also in my 4-channel viewport because I just need multiple views when creating this object. And in creating this object, I'm going to go and look at it from multiple perspectives. I know just by watching this tutorial on creating a fork that I'm going to need more subdivisions along this surface. And it's written out in the tutorial that we had listed before, but I am going to actually, the one on faces, I'm going to actually go into object mode and go into what would be the mesh, the edit mesh tool, the mesh tool, and I'm going to go down into insert edge loop. And I'm going to click this box so this appears. So this separate tool settings box is going to be pretty important down the road, and you'll find it over here as well in this icon box. Each tool in Maya has a tool setting, and this is just one tool that has it. So I want it to be on multiple edge loops, and I know that it's worth looking at this from the top down. I'm going to change this to 10. And I'm going to click on the edges here, and it divides it into 10 different areas to craft this fork based on this cube model. I'm going to go ahead and start dividing this fork into a way that I think would be fork-ish. I'm going to right click, go into vertex mode, and it divides it up into all the vertices. The key Q on the keyboard is good to go to this selection tool. So if you saw before, I was kind of out of that. I pressed it, and I'm going to start selecting vertices on here and shaping this by going into the various W and R buttons. So I'm going to press R and start, crafting this, selecting with my mouse and kind of creating this fork. And this fork, to me, will be adjusted over the span of this like 20 or 30-minute tutorial. But I want to give you kind of a simple look at what I think is necessary for understanding how to model in Maya. And this is basic modeling. So what we're doing right now is we're creating a form that looks something akin to a fork that I would think that it looks like from my head, just from thinking, what it would look like. And pressing Option and dragging it, I'm going to pull this out some, maybe minimize it a little bit more right here. I'm going to select these. I'm going to move them up. Right, something like that. I'm going to press Option, center mouse key, drag up, kind of do something similar over here where maybe it needs to look a little bit different. Press R, kind of expand it out slowly, right? Something like that. Maybe move this with my W key, move it down here. And I'm starting to get this, what looks like a fork. You can see that, but it's pretty flat. So because it's flat, I'm going to go into different views. This is the front of the fork, this is the side, and that might be most useful to me right now. I'm also going to go into what would be the top of the fork and do more subdivisions. So I've selected, I'm going to go into object mode, and I might have to go into edge mode or face mode, but I'm looking at this and I know that the top of the fork is going to need some more subdivisions, more edge loops. So I'm going to go back into insert edge loops in my mesh tools and click on the box, and I'm going to change this number to 5, and I'm actually going to select edges. Right here, click on the edges. So I'm just going to click on these edges and divide them. That should have divided the fork and at least the prongs of the fork a little bit more. So I'm going to close my tool setting, and I'm going to look back at the side view. Press Option and drag to where these different prongs are. I'm going to go into vertex mode. Let's see where I'm at actually. I'll press Q to get back into selection mode. Go to vertex, make sure I'm in the right area. Yep, I am. Okay, I'm going to start raising the fork on various parts. So I'm thinking that this part mostly kind of raises up. So I'm pressing Q and I'm just going to drag all of these up like so. And then I'm going to zoom in more and kind of lower individually each of these down a little bit to make the fork feel more natural until it gets to square one. So you can see this stuff. I want to point out one thing, and this is for a later tutorial, but you have all these, you see all these numbers here. And this becomes important down the road. It's a display that you can do when you go to show, you're in heads up display and you go to poly count. So right now I have poly count selected. I'm going to go and do that again, heads up display, go back into poly count, select that. That shows the number of faces you have, and the number of edges and vertices. So right now you can see that I have 286 faces. This becomes important when we start sculpting larger environments. So I'm going to keep these numbers up just for all intents and purposes. Now I'm going to continue creating my forks that, areas where I think it can be raised and lowered. So I'm going to lower this and raise this. And again, I'm trying to be as patient as I can with modeling a fork. I'm going to move this over some. I'm going to kind of drag over here. Kind of move this maybe up some over here. And this is just from thinking about what a fork looks like. Again, I don't have a reference image. And I think that this is maybe an easier model to work on without a reference image, but it's not necessarily the best thing to do. So right now I'm thinking that maybe this fork is a little bit, it bends too much. So I'm going to kind of minimize it some. Right, I'm going to move that over about to there. And I'm looking at my model here. This might have to come down some. So like there. Again, this could move over for later. And this could actually be extruded out totally. So I'm going to option grab, do something like that. And kind of getting to a point where it's starting to look like a simple object. Okay. Now I'm in the top view here, and we need to make these kind of prong in. So I'm going to kind of go in my vertex mode and keep on doing this where I'm selecting and shift selecting different vertices. So these should select too. I guess they don't. Let me try that again. Okay, well, I'm just going to move this as such. There is definitely an easier way to do this. So note it that I'm just going to create these fork prongs individually, and I could actually probably go into like if I wanted to select these, press shift. I wasn't pressing shift on the keyboard, I was pressing the function key. So that's why it wasn't extending. I wasn't looking at my keyboard. But say I wanted to do something like that. And then I'm going to shift select this, move them in, kind of like that, kind of be like teeth. And I'm going to take these, and these are sometimes a little bit shorter. So, or a little bit thinner. And again, go to my move tool, move that in, move this in, and then move these points in to a tight point, more or less. Doesn't have to be jagged, but something that resembles what the fork would look like. I'm going to bring some of these out a little bit, something like that. So it kind of naturally builds up. This point could be brought in some, and so could this. So I'm going to shift select and press R on my keyboard, kind of bring that in like this. I'm going to shift select these and shift select these, and also bring those out a little bit. Maybe not so much, so I'm just going to shift select this, and shift select that, bring it in, bring this in. So you can see that I'm being very kind of like deliberate, and it's a strange looking fork, but it's a fork nonetheless. So I have this kind of modeled in a way, and I'm going to start you could get much more detailed than I have. If I go back into object mode by right clicking and press 3 on the keyboard, the whole fork kind of smooths out, and you can see that those prongs need to be a little bit wider when I'm in object mode and when I've smoothed out the surface. And you can also see if I'm pressing Command Z a couple of times, when I smooth out the surface, oh, I'm sorry, when I go back to regular mode, not smooth mode, I'm going to actually go back and press Command Z and redo them. The faces go up. So again, this is the what smoothness does is it creates a multitude of faces rather than what was there before. It ups it, it multiplies it. So there's many more faces that I'm dealing with. It rounds it out, and you can kind of see that by looking at this. And if I go into face mode, I have more faces to be working with. So let's just say this is kind of like the beginning model of this fork. I feel like it could still use work, so I press 1 on the keyboard. I'm going to expand these edges again, and I'm going to go into vertex mode. Expand these edges and these. By expand, I just mean I'm going to fatten them up a little bit. And I'm going to do the same for this. I'm going to go into W, do something like this, do something like this, and maybe I can actually go into this more and really start to shape it like a fork so that it feels like the weight of the fork is actually there. There might be like a divot here. There might be edges around the fork that will give it more of a realistic appeal. So in doing so, I'm going to zoom in and start dropping more edge loops. So I'm going to go press this edge loop. I'm going to do this equidistance from the edge and go back into edge and create an edge loop there. I'm going to do another one maybe up here, right there. So you can see how it moves along the edge. I'm going to create another one right there. Delete that. Create one here. Create one here. There we go. I drag from the edge, the top edge. So right now I have a few more edges, and I am going to kind of shrink this area here, just kind of create a little bit of a divot. So I'm going to do soft selection by pressing B on the keyboard. I'm going to go into the vertex and or even the faces, but by pressing B on the keyboard, it gives kind of like an area that will be worked with a little bit differently. So again, I press B, I'm going to close this window out, and you can see the area that's highlighted kind of is where it'll be adjusted more or less. So if I keep my finger on B and drag in, the area that's highlighted more or less, I'm going to go to a different mode. I'm going to go into face mode so you can see better. So the area that's highlighted yellow is kind of where the action is going to happen. So this is kind of like a brush tool. So I'm pressing B. I have my left button clicked down, and I'm holding both of these buttons to adjust the area that I kind of want to select. And by selecting that face, I can kind of bring it down more naturally than it would if it was in a different mode. And you can see that kind of creates, in being in the soft selection tool, which is selecting B, I can better, it just has a more natural feel to the way the shape is formed. Rather, if I just selected this, you can see how it comes up a little bit harder. It's more pronounced. So I'm going to work my way down this fork, And there might be times when I select two faces and I bring them, up or so. And just looking at this in different modes, different windows, I can kind of guesstimate how I want this fork to look on all sides. So you can kind of see, I kind of want the same thing to happen over at the end of the fork. And maybe I want the vertices to kind of come in a little bit. So I'm going to select these two faces and bring this in like that. I'm actually going to go to vertex mode and bring just the vertices in. So I'm going to select the vertices, bring those in a little bit. I'm going to go out of soft selection tool, do something like that. That's what I wanted to do. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go back into face mode. I'm going to select these three faces and those two faces and kind of create in the soft selection tool kind of like a divot, I guess, if it works. I'm going to do the extrude. Let's see how to do this. So I think you guys get what I'm trying to do. And it might have to be done in, so I'm in soft selection. I'm gonna, again, zoom in. I'm gonna go into W and bring these up. And I might want to be in edge mode to do this. So I'm gonna select edges. These edges here. And again, I'm going to move it up some. There we go. Something like that. So it has kind of like a shape to it. Right? You can kind of see it's there. I'm going to select object mode and press 3 on the keyboard. Get out of object mode. So you can see it kind of has that like pattern, that raised pattern on it. And this is just from polygonal modeling. This is too sharp, so I'm gonna go back into the edge mode and maybe even go out of this mode. I'm going to try to create another line so you can see how when I'm out of the smooth selection tool how the vertices were really affected, right? And I'm going to actually try to add another edge loop. So I'm going to insert an edge loop here and one here and play around with the edges now so that maybe it doesn't feel as sharp. And I'm going to select some faces. Oops. Let's go back into face mode. Look at it from here actually. Select option. Into face mode. Back. B. I'm already been adding so many edges. I'm going to take it back a couple of times because I added some edges. I'm going to go back to my cube. Go to face. Press Q on the keyboard because I was in edge mode down here. Now I press Q to go to soft selection tool. So you can kind of learn with me to see why those edges were created inadvertently. I created this edge, but it's okay, I think. I'm going to kind of pull this out just a little bit, something like that. Okay, so it's not as sharp. Hopefully that kind of got done what I wanted it to get done. I'm going to go back into object mode. And I'm going to kind of scroll out so you can kind of see my fork a little bit better. This area could again, I'm going to go back into, this is a super boring tutorial again, but hopefully it helps you guys understand that I think this takes time. So I'm going to press Command Z on that, go back to W, pull this out a little bit more, right? And I'm actually going to drop these edges a little bit more. So I'm going to go press B and just drop these a little bit. So the fork kind of feels a little bit more natural. I'm going to go into face mode. And I'm going to go into object mode. kind of click off of this, and this is kind of a more shapely version of the fork, right? It has kind of like a spork kind of action going on. By pressing 3 and clicking away, it shows the shape. So to keep on going, now that I've created this design, I want to add a material to this. So I'm going to actually click the fork. I'm going to go to my history, edit, delete by type, delete history. That should kind of take this down to the 4 initial things of this shape. I'm going to go ahead and start naming my object. I'm going to name it a fork. And because it's the only thing in my scene, I don't really need any layers, right? The size of this fork, this should be in millimeters, this display. Let's check it just to make sure. I don't think it's changed, but it might have changed since my last settings. So I'm going to go to settings, preferences, go to preferences, go to settings. It is in millimeters. I'm going to change that to inches. So I have kind of like a better idea of the size of this. So remember, each individual square is an inch. I'm going to actually raise that up so I can make this fork pretty much to scale. So I think a fork is probably about 7 inches or so. And this looks like 4 inches across, 4.5 inches across. So this should be about the size of the fork, roughly to scale. And it's important to have things to scale, I think, just for general, just so you know what you're working with, right? And there are things about this fork that could definitely be better, but I'm just going to leave it as is. And I'm going to go ahead and start applying my materials. So we've done this before in class, and there's more to it than just, the surfaces that are here. Because I feel like this is a very metallic surface, I'm going to apply that blend material. And with my blend material, I'm going to make a few adjustments. So I'm going to lighten the translucence of it, translucence depth, make it a little bit more shinier. The specular roll off I'm going to increase. The reflected color, I wonder what happens if I change this color to something more, maybe like a bluish hue. So that changes the reflected color a little bit so that the fork has a kind of a bluish reflection to it, to the surface. And I'm going to bring that down some, right? Because it's a little bit too blue. I'm going to look at the glow intensity, maybe bring that up some. And, I'm just playing around with this just to kind of give an idea to myself of when I press 6, what this object looks like. So it looks, a little bit shiny. It looks like it could be a plastic fork rather than a metal fork. And even the shape of it looks like it would be a plastic fork. With this rendered, or with this material put on, I'm going to start adding some lights from my render scene. So this is something we haven't talked about. And each of these are, various kinds of lights. If I add a point light, I'm going to zoom out. You can kind of see it right here. And I'm going to bring that point light up. So in adding these lights and like bringing them up, if I put on lighting and use default lighting, it'll only change it'll only change from lighting from these 2 lights that are here, that are inside default lighting that I've just added. So using all lights uses all the lights that are used in this by pressing 5. By pressing 5. You can see that lighting is another thing that we should actually work with, and that'll be the next tutorial. So right now I have my fork. It's lit in a way that is just working in this mode. I haven't gone to rendering and I haven't done hypershading, but these are areas where we might want to explore soon. So start checking those out, and I thank you for watching this tutorial on the fork.